The humiliation lasted less than a minute, but it shattered the carefully polished unity of the monarchy. Before the first course had even been served at the Coronation State Dinner, Queen Camilla stopped a palace steward, pointed toward Catherine's place at the senior royal table, and ordered it removed. The Princess of Wales did not argue. She simply stared across the room, and everyone saw the fury gathering behind her silence. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine had entered Buckingham Palace beside Prince William, expecting an evening of controlled ceremony, not a public attack. The Coronation State Dinner was a formal banquet honoring the new reign, bringing senior royals together with foreign dignitaries, government representatives, and trusted palace officials. Every chair carried meaning because seating near the sovereign, the reigning monarch, showed rank, confidence, and influence. Her printed place card already stood near King Charles and Camilla, proof that palace protocol, the official system governing royal events, had approved her position. Camilla changed everything, moments before the guests sat down. She stopped the steward, pointed at Catherine's card, and ordered him to move it to a secondary table. Then the Queen delivered the wound clearly. This table is reserved for those holding official responsibility tonight. Catherine froze as conversation died around her. Her fingers tightened against the chair, yet she refused to argue. The princess would not let humiliation become spectacle. William moved toward his wife, anger breaking through his careful expression. Catherine looked at him and whispered, "Not here." The prince stopped, but he remained close enough for her to feel his support. Across the table, Charles watched the steward carry the card away. The king knew he had never approved this change. Still, he said nothing, and his silence made Camilla's order appear to carry the monarch's full authority. Catherine crossed the room and took the lesser seat without lowering her head. When Camilla lifted her glass for the opening toast, the princess left hers untouched. William noticed. Charles noticed. So did the officials who understood that one quiet refusal could speak louder than an argument. The real shock came after dinner. A documented seating instruction reached Catherine through a trusted palace official, showing that Camilla had approved the change hours earlier in her own handwriting. The insult had not been impulsive. It had been planned. What looked like royal arrogance was actually a calculated move, and the private fear driving the Queen was about to be exposed. Once Catherine understood why, the conflict would reach beyond one chair, one dinner, or one night of wounded royal pride. Catherine's fury was not born from the loss of a chair. It came from what that chair represented. She had spent years accepting scrutiny, performing demanding duties, and protecting the monarchy's future, without publicly challenging its present queen. Camilla understood that sacrifice. She also understood Catherine's growing influence. Beneath the glittering ceremony, the dinner exposed two women confronting the same terrifying truth. Only one of them truly commanded the room. Catherine had built her position through restraint, public service, and unwavering loyalty to Prince William. As Princess of Wales, the title traditionally held by the woman expected to become the next queen, she represented the monarchy's future without possessing the power to control its present. Yet affection could not be ordered, and public confidence could not be created by rank alone. People trusted her because she had suffered under pressure, without turning that suffering into bitterness. Camilla occupied the higher place, but the crown had never silenced her deepest fear. Every warm reception Catherine received reminded the Queen that official authority could not guarantee emotional acceptance. Before the dinner, the princess entered a quiet antechamber and found her studying the seating plan. She offered a polite greeting. The monarch folded the page immediately, answered with cold formality, and walked away without explaining why her hand had been resting beside Catherine's name. The insult at dinner suddenly made that exchange impossible to forget. Catherine understood that her relocation had been designed to make her appear unimportant before William, Charles, and the foreign guests. Worse, The king's silence had turned one woman's cruelty into something resembling royal approval. She had accepted criticism for years, but this attack reached beyond pride. It struck at the future she and her husband had spent their lives preparing to protect. William found his wife alone after the dinner, struggling to remove a bracelet with trembling fingers. Catherine finally admitted what she had hidden in public. She was not moving my chair. She was reducing our future. The prince took the bracelet gently from her hand and promised that he would discover who approved the change. His anger deepened because her humiliation had also challenged his place as the future king. Camilla confronted Charles later that night and insisted Catherine had begun behaving as though she were already queen. The king rejected the accusation, but his wife reminded him that guests had looked toward the princess before responding to the opening toast. Her words exposed the real wound. She had not acted from protocol. She had acted from fear. William received confirmation before midnight. A senior courtier privately handed him a documented copy of the original seating chart, proving Charles's office had approved Catherine's place before Camilla intervened. Beside his wife's name, the prince discovered 3 handwritten words: "Reduce her prominence." William had seen that phrase before. It led back to an earlier ceremony, a hidden confrontation, and the afternoon when Camilla's resentment finally became strategy. The Coronation State Dinner did not create the feud. It revealed it. 3 weeks earlier, beneath the disciplined smiles of a royal garden reception, Camilla had watched an apparently harmless moment become a warning. A foreign delegation bypassed her receiving line and gathered around Catherine instead. There was no confrontation and no raised voice. Yet before that afternoon ended, one private conversation ensured the insult would return in a far more devastating form. Catherine had begun receiving more ceremonial duties beside Prince William, placing both of them at the heart of the monarchy's public future. Camilla feared that growing attention was weakening her constitutional position, the recognized place and authority she held as queen beside the sovereign. Palace staff sensed the tension and tried to prevent it from becoming visible. They carefully separated arrival times, speeches, official photographs, and receiving lines, the arranged rows where royals formally welcome invited guests. The danger arrived through a frightened child. During the Buckingham Palace garden reception, the young daughter of a visiting diplomat became overwhelmed and refused to approach the senior royals. Catherine noticed her distress, stepped away from the planned order, and spoke gently until the girl relaxed. The sincere exchange drew her parents, other diplomats, and nearby guests toward the princess. Within moments, warmth gathered around Catherine, while Camilla remained at the formal reception point with only 2 aides. Camilla watched the crowd and felt something inside her harden. She did not see compassion. She saw a deliberate display of influence that made the queen appear distant at her own event. When Catherine approached her afterward, the monarch lowered her voice and said, "You appear to have forgotten whose reception this is." The princess explained that she had only comforted a frightened child. Camilla walked away before she could finish, leaving Catherine stunned by the accusation. Catherine later told William about the exchange during a private conversation in their palace apartment. The prince assured his wife that kindness was not disloyalty, yet he understood why the warning troubled her. Camilla had not merely criticized one unscheduled moment. She had treated public affection as a threat, and Catherine's growing popularity as something requiring control. Camilla acted that evening. She summoned the deputy household coordinator and ordered him to reduce prominence around Catherine during future ceremonies. The coordinator preserved those words in his private scheduling notes, creating a documented account of the instruction. Weeks later, the same official would receive the altered dinner plan and recognize the phrase, "beside the princess's name." Charles discovered another warning when a reception photograph featuring Catherine disappeared from the approved official selection. The king asked Camilla why it had been removed. She answered that the image created an inaccurate impression of precedence, the formal order showing which royal ranks above another. He placed the rejected photograph on his desk and studied it silently. The Queen turned it face down and told him, "Popularity must never be confused with authority." That gesture exposed everything. Once the coordinator placed both documented instructions into William's hands, the dinner humiliation could no longer be dismissed as confusion. The future king now had proof of a planned campaign, and the confrontation everyone feared had become unavoidable. Catherine had remained silent before the guests, but silence was no longer loyalty. Shortly after midnight, she entered a private sitting room where Camilla was waiting beside the dying fire. No aides stood nearby. No cameras could soften what followed. The princess placed the altered seating plan on the table and asked one direct question. Was humiliating me the purpose, or simply the method? The Queen's answer changed their relationship forever. William had wanted to confront Camilla himself, but Catherine refused to hide behind her husband. The insult had been aimed at her, and she would define her own response. Before entering the room, she told the prince that any interruption would make it appear she lacked the strength to defend her position. He reluctantly remained outside, knowing the next few minutes could permanently divide the family. Camilla already knew that William possessed the original seating chart. That chart was the approved arrangement, showing where every guest would sit and what their placement communicated about royal rank. The Queen did not arrive prepared to apologize. She arrived determined to defend her authority, convinced that admitting fault would surrender control to the woman she had begun viewing as a rival. Catherine laid both versions of the chart beside each other. She pointed to the handwritten instruction and asked why her approved position had been changed after Charles had authorized it. Camilla did not deny the writing. Instead, she accused the princess of encouraging expectations she had not earned and drawing attention away from the crown, the institution representing the sovereign and the authority of the monarchy. Politeness, she said, had become Catherine's disguise for ambition. Catherine's composure finally cracked. She reminded Camilla of the duties she had performed, the criticism she had endured, and the private suffering she had carried without damaging the family. Illness, pressure, and sacrifice had never been weapons in a campaign against the Queen. Public humiliation is not royal discipline, she said. It is cruelty protected by rank. Camilla admitted the decision was deliberate. She had forced Catherine into a secondary place because she wanted the room to recognize where authority still rested. The confession stripped away every possible excuse. This had not been a scheduling mistake or a steward's error. It had been punishment. Catherine removed the ceremonial brooch from her dress and placed it beside the charts. The brooch was an official jewel, worn to symbolize continuity and family unity. She told Camilla she would not carry that symbol while being treated as a threat inside the very family it represented. The Queen stared at the jewel but offered no apology. Charles entered after hearing the raised voices. Camilla turned toward him expecting support, but the king lifted the altered chart and asked why his approval had been overridden. He then ordered both women to remain silent publicly while he discovered who had helped execute the change. The conflict had escaped the family. It was now a struggle over who could control the palace machinery and whether Charles still possessed the power to stop it. Camilla had moved one place card, but the order traveled through an entire chain of royal authority. A coordinator rewrote the chart. A steward carried it into the ballroom. An official chose not to warn the king. By morning, Charles understood that the humiliation had succeeded because several people believed the Queen's wishes outranked his approval. The family conflict had exposed something more dangerous: uncertainty at the very center of the household. Charles sat alone with the original and revised seating charts spread before him. Royal events depended on strict approval, meaning each arrangement had to pass through senior offices before staff could act. Even one changed chair could signal rank, favor, or rejection, especially before foreign representatives. Yet Camilla's household had gradually gained control over shared ceremonial planning, blurring the line between her personal wishes and commands issued in the sovereign's name. Charles repeatedly touched the crossed-out place beside Catherine's name. His silence during the dinner had made him appear complicit, and that appearance mattered, because guests treated his reaction as the final measure of royal approval. The king had not ordered the humiliation, but he had allowed it to stand. For him, that failure now felt impossible to escape. The household coordinator entered expecting dismissal. Charles asked who had delivered the instruction, and why nobody had sought confirmation. The official admitted that Camilla had issued the order directly, and that he feared refusing her would end his palace career. His documented account also showed that other staff had questioned the change, but obeyed because they assumed the queen spoke with the monarch's authority. Camilla defended herself when Charles confronted her. She insisted she had protected the dignity of the crown, the institution representing royal authority and continuity, from Catherine's growing influence. The king answered that dignity could never be defended through humiliation. She accused him of surrendering to popularity, but he warned that she had used his name to settle a private fear. The evidence became even darker. A recorded planning conversation confirmed that one official had warned Camilla the relocation would embarrass Catherine publicly. The queen answered that public recognition was exactly what would make the correction effective. This was no longer simply an admission of intent. It was proof that the pain had been part of the design. William then learned that Catherine's secondary chair had been positioned beneath a camera used for the official broadcast feed. The prince understood immediately. His wife's humiliation had been arranged where it could escape the ballroom and reach the public. Catherine had not merely been moved, she had been placed on display. Charles made his decision. He signed a temporary instruction removing Camilla's household from unilateral control, the power to act without further approval, over joint ceremonial arrangements. The king set down his pen and told his private secretary, "No one speaks with my authority unless I have given it." The secretary carried the order directly to the queen's office. Charles had stopped the hidden campaign, but the order struck Camilla at her deepest fear. She was about to lose authority in front of the household, and her backlash would begin before the morning ended. The morning after the dinner, the palace stopped pretending nothing had happened. Staff avoided one another in the corridors. Scheduled meetings disappeared from calendars. Camilla's office received an order stripping it of ceremonial control, while Catherine cancelled a joint engagement without explanation. Behind separate doors, both women confronted a new reality. One had been humiliated before the world. The other had discovered that even a queen could be overruled. Charles's signed instruction placed future seating, precedence, and joint appearances under a neutral team, reporting directly to the sovereign. Precedence meant the formal order deciding where each royal stood, sat, or entered during official events. Camilla could still offer advice, but she could no longer change arrangements alone. That restriction mattered because it removed the quiet power she had used to turn a private insecurity into a public punishment. Camilla read the order at her desk and slowly removed her glasses. She dismissed her secretary, closed the door, and stared at Charles's signature. The queen felt betrayed by the man whose authority she believed she had been defending. Instead of accepting responsibility, she blamed Catherine for allowing a family dispute to become an institutional reprimand, a formal punishment imposed through palace rules, rather than a private disagreement. Catherine delivered her own message through silence. She withdrew from a scheduled planning session involving Camilla, immediately signaling that their public partnership had fractured. The princess knew attending would force her to behave as though nothing had happened, while refusing risked exposing the division. Either choice carried a price, and the humiliation had left her unwilling to protect false unity at the cost of her dignity. William found his wife considering an even larger withdrawal. Catherine told him she might step back from the next palace dinner because she could not sit beside the queen and pretend forgiveness. The prince took her hand and revealed that the official recording archive, the palace collection preserving footage from major events, contained the entire incident. A camera had captured Camilla's gesture, Catherine's reaction, and Charles's failure to intervene. William's warning grew darker. The king had ordered the footage withheld from official release, but a still image had already reached a newspaper editor through an archived production copy. The photograph showed the steward carrying away the place card, while Catherine stood beside the table. If published, the palace's private rupture would become a national spectacle, and Charles's silence would be judged alongside Camilla's cruelty. William asked whether Catherine wanted him to confront his father. She refused. The princess said Charles had to choose his response freely, without pressure from the future king. If he defended her only because his heir demanded it, the apology would carry no moral weight. Charles made that choice before dawn. He sent Catherine a private request to meet him alone, without William, Camilla, or palace officials. The king would not face her as sovereign and heir's wife, but as two wounded members of one family. With the queen isolated and the photograph moving toward publication, that conversation became the monarchy's last chance to repair what the dinner had destroyed. There were no secretaries, no prepared statements, and no ceremonial distance when Charles met Catherine the next morning. The king stood beside a cold fireplace, holding the place card that had been taken from her table. For the first time since the dinner, he did not speak as sovereign. He spoke as a father-in-law who had watched an act of cruelty unfold and lacked the courage to stop it quickly enough. Charles had invited Catherine into his private sitting room before the household began its day. He specifically asked that William and all palace officials remain outside, removing every institutional barrier between them. A sovereign was the reigning monarch, whose words carried final royal authority. But the king knew that authority alone could not repair this wound. Catherine entered expecting another demand for discretion. Instead, she found her original place card resting between them. Charles apologized without conditions. He admitted that his silence had deepened the humiliation because every guest naturally interpreted it as consent. The king had worried that confronting Camilla before foreign dignitaries would create a larger scandal. Yet, by protecting the dinner from disruption, he had failed to protect Catherine from cruelty. That choice now filled him with shame. Catherine answered with painful honesty. Camilla's words had wounded her, but Charles's failure to intervene had hurt more. The princess had trusted him to defend the dignity of his family, when royal ceremony made it impossible for her to defend herself without appearing disrespectful. She had accepted years of pressure for the monarchy. In return, she had been left standing alone while her place was carried away. Charles promised that Catherine's role would never again be changed to satisfy personal jealousy. He asked her not to abandon upcoming duties because withdrawal would allow the humiliation to define her public position. The king then revealed his decision through a signed instruction. Camilla's authority over joint state dinner planning had been permanently suspended. State dinner planning meant the official process controlling guests, seating, speeches, and ceremonial roles at major royal banquets. Catherine lifted the recovered place card and studied her name. Then she returned it to Charles. "I do not need the chair restored," she said. "I need the behavior behind its removal condemned." The king accepted the distinction. Restoration without accountability would only hide the wound rather than heal it. Charles confirmed that he had demanded a written apology from Camilla. Catherine agreed to attend the next public engagement beside him, but only after the queen acknowledged the harm privately and accepted the new boundaries. William supported his wife's condition when she later explained the meeting, though the prince warned that public attention was already closing in. Camilla signed the apology that morning. Before she could deliver it, however, A documented production still from the dinner appeared across Britain's newspapers. The family had found a path toward accountability, but the outside world was about to witness Catherine's humiliation and demand a verdict of its own. By sunrise, the empty chair was no longer a palace secret. A single photograph showed Catherine standing beside the senior table as a steward carried away her place card, while Camilla watched from only a few feet away. It contained no shouting and no visible confrontation, yet the restraint made it more powerful. Britain saw humiliation frozen in one frame, and the monarchy's private struggle immediately became a public judgment. The palace reacted with a brief statement calling the seating change an internal planning error. That explanation collapsed when senior royal correspondents received a documented copy of Camilla's handwritten instruction. Royal correspondents were journalists assigned to examine the monarchy and explain palace events to the public. Their reports established that Catherine's original position had already been approved before the Queen ordered it changed. Broadcasters replayed the sequence repeatedly. Commentators focused on Catherine's controlled response, Camilla's deliberate gesture, and Charles's painful silence. They framed the dinner as a test of character, rather than a dispute over precedence, the formal order deciding where royals are placed according to rank. The question was no longer who deserved the chair. It was who had shown dignity after power was used cruelly. The London Chronicle captured the anger with one brutal front page. Beneath the photograph appeared the headline, "The Empty Chair. Catherine's Silence Shames the Palace." Copies were raised above a crowd gathering near Buckingham Palace's gates. The image became powerful because it showed no retaliation from the princess. Her restraint stood against the coldness of the act. Catherine saw the front page while preparing for her next engagement. She closed the newspaper and told William that public sympathy must never become a weapon against Charles or Camilla. The prince understood her reasoning. If they used the scandal to strengthen their own position, they would repeat the same mistake the Queen had made, turning personal pain into a struggle for control. Camilla watched a broadcaster describe the incident as authority without compassion. She switched off the television immediately, but the phrase remained with her. Charles had used similar words during their confrontation, and now the country had reached the same verdict. The Queen could dismiss one critic. She could not easily dismiss an entire nation. Supporters gathered outside Windsor Castle, holding handwritten signs that read, "Dignity is not a seat." When Catherine's car passed, the crowd applauded. The princess acknowledged them calmly, without smiling in triumph, because she understood that another woman's public collapse should never become her celebration. Charles then approved a second palace statement confirming that ceremonial procedures had changed, and Catherine's official position had never been reduced. The carefully worded admission proved the dinner alteration was personal, not constitutional. At their next engagement, the king invited her to walk beside him. She accepted, turning public humiliation into visible restoration. One act remained. Camilla now had to face Catherine without rank, staff, or ceremony. The country had chosen dignity over dominance. Inside the room where the wound began, the Queen would have to make that same choice. The final reckoning did not happen beneath chandeliers or before television cameras. It happened in a small palace room where two women sat opposite each other without aids, speeches, or ceremonial protection. Camilla had arrived with a written apology, but Catherine did not ask her to read it. The princess wanted something more difficult than carefully approved words. She wanted the Queen to understand why the empty chair had wounded the monarchy itself. Charles had arranged the meeting, but refused to attend. The king understood that reconciliation could not be commanded by the sovereign, the reigning monarch whose authority directs the royal household. Catherine and Camilla had to choose it themselves. He also confirmed through a signed instruction that the permanent procedural change would remain, regardless of their conversation. The Queen would never again control shared royal ceremonies without additional approval. Camilla placed the signed apology on the table. Her voice remained steady until she finally admitted the truth. She had moved Catherine because she felt overshadowed. The monarch confessed that she had used a public ceremony to settle a private insecurity. She had wanted the room to recognize her authority, but her actions had revealed fear instead. For once, she offered no defense. Catherine accepted the apology without minimizing the damage. She explained that royal rank carried a duty to protect people from humiliation, especially when they could not answer without damaging the institution they served. The princess had remained silent at dinner because open resistance would have created a greater crisis. Camilla had exploited that restraint, and forgiveness could not erase the choice behind it. Camilla promised never again to interfere with Catherine's position or use Charles's authority without his consent. The queen consort accepted the permanent ceremonial boundaries, meaning the official limits controlling her role in joint events. Catherine agreed to resume shared duties, but their relationship would no longer depend on artificial closeness. Respect would replace performance. Clear limits would replace hidden resentment. Charles later gave William his verdict during a private, recorded conversation preserved in the household account. The king admitted that his silence had been a failure of leadership and confirmed the restrictions would remain after public attention faded. When the prince found Catherine, he asked whether she felt victorious. She answered quietly, "Victory would have been preventing it. What we achieved was accountability." Catherine entered the next state dinner beside William and took her approved place without spectacle. Camilla greeted her respectfully. Charles raised the opening toast, and the princess lifted her glass, not in surrender, but in restored dignity. Nothing remained unresolved. The chair was restored. The boundary was permanent. The apology was accepted. Camilla learned that authority loses its moral force when driven by fear, while Charles learned that silence can protect cruelty. Catherine prevailed, because she chose neither revenge nor submission. She became the moral center the crown could no longer afford to underestimate. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.